Good evening. Welcome to the 10th International Writers Festival in Mishkenot Sha'ananim. My name is Moti Schwartz. I'm very happy to see you all here with us in the festival that serves as the main platform in Israel for exploration of Israeli and international literature. This year, we are delighted and honored to welcome Joshuah Cohen, the 2022 Pulitzer Prize laureate for his extremely brilliant and hilarious book, The Netanyahus. A lot has been written about Joshuah and the book in recent days, since he won the prize, but we knew it before. If I may, a personal note, I read and finished the book on my way to meet Joshua in New York last November. Holding the brand new Hebrew edition just came out day before my flight, and it was so rewarding. The Italian restaurant he picked for our meeting helped as well. And that's how we ended having him here right in time for last week announcements. Joshua stays with us also as a part of a special residency program in which he divides his time between Jerusalem and Venice. Joshua will speak with Benny Tzipher, one of the senior culture and literature journalists in Israel, the editor of the culture and literature section in Haaretz weekend edition, and more, and also has connections to the Netanyahus, but different than those of Joshua. I would like to thank the Jerusalem Foundation, the Minister of Culture and Sport, the Bracha Foundation, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cultural Diplomacy Department, and to all our dear supporters and sponsors. Special thanks to the U.S. Embassy in Israel and the American Center in Jerusalem for their support. We appreciate it very much. The long-time friendship means a lot of us. Enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Most of the questions I'll ask, I know already the answer because we met by chance, half by chance, on Saturday already at the dinner in Karmei Yosef. Yeah. And so we talked, and so the whole tension is not there anymore, but I'll find something yeah, we'll find something. But first...
I thought it was just yes or no questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're exhausted.
Yes.
Once. Okay, great. So now it's time to attack, okay? So we'll attack together. In fact, we organized something for you, a reading of poetry. We won't say, okay, we won't say who wrote the poem. I'll read in Hebrew. And Josh translated one of the... No?
The first, yeah, in 5 minutes I translated the first stanza, so it's
so
bad.
It has to do with his novel, but perhaps you'll guess during when I read it. Okay. Of course in Hebrew, yeah? בים הקטל האדום. לילה טורף. It's not Jabotinsky, but it's close. חם, זה חם. ינשופים צורכים מר, אל אור כוכבי סער עטים. שיני הים הכיפים, יורקים קצב תחלחל, בסירה השחורה הם שתים. הם טרופי ליטופים, עמומה האימה, גאיית גלי פרא בדהור, במעגל חרבות איש אישה חבוקים, וצוללים רומחי מוות ואור. פתאום מפל רעם, נשוב היא תרעד, הן תשוב ויסגרונו כפים. הוא לעג, מאוויי שהדפו כקיטור, כבר נדפו ורוגעים עייפים. תם נתיב אל הכיף יפקדו משברים, הכיפה חבוק וגלול, הסירה התמכרה לתשוקות הגלים, ובאוזניו זמר סער יצלול. Should I continue or no? It's a bit more. באופל תר אור, מרגלים מבצע רום, ימות ברעמים כי יואב, עשן תאוותך יעטוף איי תום, אך נוגים לפידי הזהב. רד נקבות סלעי תהום עלותות שוקקות, שזרמים משתפכים בן במרי, בהמות לבבך, בפעמון, בחורבות חלומות אהבה, ערירי. לתוהו, למורד, פה יזרום רן הפקר, אם ילל עז על 1000 קברים, יבריקו סכינים, שחוק נוגה ליפה, וגאון אלילה, שוב סוקר אור אדום, הוא קרא, הוא דובב, הסירך, ויחתור במשות בשברים. Okay, it's a bit difficult, isn't it? And now read if you want to read the first paragraph, the strophe.
Stanza, yeah. A rapacious night, owls shriek bitter, stormy starlight strikes, the teeth of the sea spit bluish foam at the stones, as on in the black boat they sail.
Okay. Great. Yeah, so the person who wrote that poem is Ben Zion Netanyahu, 1932. As a student, he was a student, he wrote it to a contest of poetry of the Hebrew University, and he got the first prize. The prize was called Pras Dvorah. And because he wasn't of the right party, because he was known as a right-wing person, very extreme right person, he didn't get the money of the prize. But he didn't let it go. He went and wrote it. There's a whole correspondence of Ben Zion Netanyahu to the university claiming his money. And finally got it. Yeah.
So this is what I have to learn for the Pulitzer, right? After this event,
yeah.
When they don't pay me,
yeah.
then the correspondence begins.
Yeah,
right?
and I think it has to do with your novel.
Yeah.
Because even though you can read, when you read when I read your novel, at first I thought that you really ridicule Ben Zion Netanyahu and the whole family Netanyahu. But finally, when you read the whole and you think about it, it comes out as a very positive person positive in the way that he is really a person that doesn't. לא מוותר. הוא לא מוותר.
Yeah, he doesn't concede. He doesn't give up.
Yeah, he doesn't give up, and that's and in a way. He's the most impressive person in your novel, because the Jewish professor Harold Bloom is a kind of diasporic Jew. Is there on the one hand he's afraid of the. Okay, I'm not asking you questions. I'm just talking. So, but
I should have brought you with me all week.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is.
Yeah.
Is. Ben Zion Netanyahu, in your opinion, negative or positive in your novel? What was your intention to do in the novel? Okay,
I will answer this. I'm not avoiding. I think that maybe, I don't know. I feel like we should explain maybe what the book is about a little bit. Yes. A little bit. Yeah. Okay. First, so it's about 200 pages long. No, it's about a meeting between a fictional professor of taxation studies, a Jew born in the Bronx, who's really been thrust into American life, out into Western New York, in the woods, where he teaches at a pretty bad college. And he's asked by the head of the history department if he would take around a candidate for a job interview. And he doesn't understand why he's being asked, because this guy is a specialist in American history and American taxation policy, something very exciting. And he's being asked to chaperone this man who is who's up for a job, who's being considered for a job in medieval European history. And when he says, why? He says, well, you're a Jew.
You should say that it takes place in the, not now.
No, this is 1959, 1960. Yeah. And so Benzion Netanyahu, who's named that in the book, and Sila, and Yoni, and who at the time is 13, and Bibi, who is 10, and Ido, who is 7, they all come up. Reuben Blum, who is my version of Harold Bloom, who's the person who gave me this anecdote, he was only expecting to see Benzion Netanyahu, but instead, you know, the ganze Mishpacha shows up, and chaos ensues. And a lot of the scenes are really debates between the Reuben Blum character and the Benzion Netanyahu character, and that reflect debates that the narrator, Reuben Blum, is having within himself. And so, back to, unlike a politician, not avoiding the question, returning to the question, you know, positive or negative, I think a couple things. I suffer from the novelist's disease of being able to have sympathy with anyone. Right? I mean, I think it's yeah, maybe it's not. I think it's the thing that makes private life hard and writing easy. Actually, yeah. When you hear anyone recount their struggles, their biography, their past, you know, you see someone crying on a bench, and I cry with them. You see someone yelling and very angry, and I want to get next to them and yell. It's a sympathetic response that I think is just born of a desire to get outside of my own skin. So Benzion Netanyahu, you know, if Bibi did not exist, right, Benzion Netanyahu wouldn't have the damage that's attached to the name. But when you think more about his own position, why he came to the United States, what were the circumstances that brought him there, I feel enormously sympathetic toward him. Yeah. I find that he was a person who wanted to be useful, and the amount of frustration of not being used to what he believed to be correct ends brought about an amazing amount of resentment, I think, and I have, you know, a novelist. What is a novelist? A novelist is a person who wants to be useful, and is stupid enough to think that, you know, the way to be useful is through writing books. And beyond that, I also I admire his conviction while detesting his politics. I admire his style, which is actually, you know, I don't. It's cleaner than that Hebrew is. It makes sense, you know, to me at least, in English. And I think he transcends these positive and negative categories. He's and that's what makes him, I hope, a good hero for fiction.
Yeah, perhaps you should emphasize to the people who don't know the biography that he was in the States because he was stuck there during the Second World War, and then he was in fact the secretary of Jabotinsky, and Jabotinsky died, and he found himself alone, and nobody helped him, and even not people of his party, because in Palestine it was Begin who took over the party, and the people who were the Jabotinsky people were put aside, and he was really alone and felt. So that's the background of the whole character.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was reacting to an interesting thing. You know, I was born. This is how far back we're going. I was born in southern New Jersey, in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is, you know, where Philadelphia, you know, throws its trash, right? And so I grew up around people of my, you know, parents' generation who, you know, always knew someone who knew BB, always had some family connection in the greater Philadelphia area, and he was a presence there. And he spoke English, at least for a while, especially in like the UN ambassador days. He really spoke English with a Philly accent. If people know, like Chris Matthews, people watch, you know, I don't think he's on TV anymore. There was some Me Too stuff with him, but they didn't take away his Philly accent. He could keep it, and BB has some of that Philly accent, and I never thought to myself, why does this guy sound like Philly? And you know, how did he get to Cheltenham High School, where they went to high school with the great baseball player Reggie Jackson and the great tenor sax player Michael Brecker? It's an amazing class at Cheltenham High School. So, you know, why? What is this, right? And I never asked myself this. And the Israelis who are in my family and my friends, when I would kind of say Ben-Zion Netanyahu, they would be like, huh? Or, yeah, he was important for Bibi. That's like the line, right? And then when you got to American circles of power, they tended to regurgitate the hasbara, like the propaganda that was given to them by Bibi, that in some crazy way, Ben-Zion Netanyahu was the father of America-Israel relations, which is how he was eulogized by John Boehner in front of Congress when he died. And so that's maybe an awareness in the you know, Republican Israel world, right? And none of it explained how the hell did he get there, right? No, none of it explained why during the most consequential decade of all of Jewish history, or at least all of Jewish history since the year 70, right? Ben-Zion Netanyahu wasn't, you know, being murdered in Europe, and he wasn't founding a state here, but he was in suburban Long Island, and he was in suburban Philadelphia, and he was going from like shul to church to City Hall, like schnurring for money for the NZO and different revisionist linked organizations in the States. None of it explained his odd relationship with Jabotinsky's corpse, right? I mean, he's the person who has to take, you know, help take the body from upstate New York, from Hunter, New York, and bring it down and ask the British if they'll take the body, and the British say no, and then he has to bury it in Long Island, and then he's thinking, here's this my idol who's buried in Long Island, and you know, and spending 20 years to get him buried next to Herzl. And so, you know, this man is a historian. You know, his specialty, we haven't even gotten to this yet, is the 15th century and is the Inquisition. But he's a historian who feels expelled from history. He feels that he has been forcibly excluded from history because of his political beliefs, and he feels increasingly as time goes on that his political beliefs are proving to be correct because the other models are failing.
Yeah. And the more you talk, the more I sympathize with you, because you are really giving a portrait of Ben-Zion Netanyahu. I didn't expect you, because in the book it's really one thing that you ridicule him, but it's not. Now I'm convinced.
I don't understand that it's a, you know, I kind of, it's funny. It's like no one is you know, more beautifully rude to people than like Israeli cab drivers, right? But then when you read it in a book, it's like offensive. It's just, you know, he's just straight.
Yeah,
he's straight ahead.
Yeah,
and I think that one of the things that I really wanted to point out in the book was this distinction that he really suffered from, beyond this, you know, living in this kind of hothouse of resentment. And he is a person. He's in academia, which is, you know, at least notionally, is a world that has certain standards for research. You know, there's peer review. There's the idea that facts must be cross-checked, and you know, there's a consensus that comes after a few generations of research. And he's sitting there. He's a historian who has an ideology, so that's already complicated the academic notion. But he's also someone whose politics have, had at different times, endorsed violence. And so he, you know, what is an academic? It's like, you know, those who can't do teach, right? Yes. You go and you hide behind the walls and you teach and you talk to other people who are interested in book learning while the revolutions go on outside. And I think he always felt this enormous anxiety between being somebody who was in having colleagues who were content with the cold and apolitical analysis of information, and his commitments and Jabotinsky desires to change the world. And as a novelist, where every couple months I get an invitation, would you like to teach at this university? And no, I'd like to kill all of you. I don't want to teach in a university. I want shit to mean something. I want people to feel. I want things to change. I want us all to live together on a cloud, right? I don't want to be on a committee. Yeah. I'm very sympathetic to him.
Yeah. The big question, like the $1 million question, is if you didn't call the book The Netanyahus and you called it The Rabinovich, Rabinovich's, I don't know how you could say it in English, would it have the same impact, the same, or would you get the Pulitzer Prize, or what is the impact of the name Netanyahu to your opinion?
Well, I mean, I have I had a dream, right? Yeah. That like, let's say I'll adapt my dream and say in the book is called The Rabinoviches, right? A visit from the Rabinoviches, okay? And my character, who is not, he can't be Bibi Rabinovich, he can't be Ben-Zion Rabinovich, so he's Benny Rabinovich, okay? And he's born in Warsaw.
There's a journalist called Benny Rabinovich.
Well, I mean, then if you start worrying about sharing names with your, then you're fucked, right? Yeah. But he's born in the same year. He's born in Warsaw. He his father is a rabbi. They come to Palestine. He enrolls in Hebrew University. He begins working on the Hebrew Encyclopedia, and and then he hooks up with Jabotinsky. He edits a bunch of revisionist periodicals and newsletters. Instead of Hayarden, Hayarkon, or something. I don't know. I picked something else, right? Whatever. Yeah. No, but we have to change the names, right? We change everything. And he moves to the United States, but instead of like Cheltenham, Pennsylvania, it's like Yeltenham or something, right? And all of this, and I change all of that, and I don't use the word Netanyahu. The dream was there's one guy in the entire world who would realize who it was, right? And I think that would maybe be my father. So so the use of it, frankly, is, you're right. There is absolutely I'm using it as an advertisement and I'm capitalizing on his name. I mean, someone else should be making money on it, And I've certainly been hearing his name beat over my head for half my life, right? So, I feel like this is some sort of, pitsuim or something. I'm like, and then some kind of, reparations. And secondarily, it's that the idea of of blending the fact and fiction is just, to me, is exactly, demonstrating to Netanyahu how it's done. My problem with these political soap operas is that they're not written well. There's a thing with the submarines, there's a thing with cigars, and there's a movie producer who does this, and this kid, and there's a stripper, and there's all of this, right? But there's no shape. There's no shape. So it's like I'm going to manipulate reality and fantasy, but I'm going to give it shape. Because the morality is in the form.
Yeah. Okay. No, great. No, I'll ask a question. No, you should ask me a question now, and I will answer. Okay. But we asked the questions already. Did Netanyahu react to your book? Okay, so I'm answering.
Yes. Okay.
No, he didn't.
Right. He didn't.
So the question is, if he read the book. I think he didn't read the book because he's not reading novels. He reads a lot, but he's not reading novels. So it's not that he has a bad opinion about you or something like that.
I don't care.
No. Okay. No. No. It's part of the. No. You asked me so-called the question, so I'm answering.
That's right. I asked you the question.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Because. Look, the thing is, I think you are trying to avoid something very fundamental in your book.
Okay.
You wrote the book, but you can interpret it as.
I'm avoiding.
The thing is that the names are very.
Absolutely.
Very important in the book. Even, not only Netanyahu's name, also the name of the person who is Blum,
absolutely.
Reuben Blum, who is Harold Bloom.
Yeah.
And all the names are really significant.
Absolutely, but I mean, I come from the tradition where names are significant.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of Charles Dickens without the names that he uses. That's half of that's half of his characterization is the use of names.
Yeah.
In terms of taking, I have to say it's like there's something deeply troubling to me, right? About the purity, You know, I mean, everything is like, you know, L'Avdil ben Kodesh l'Chol, right? It's like we're obsessed with keeping, you know, the sacred and the profane separate, you know, meat from milk, this from that, like, you know, times of day. Like, this is a tradition, Judaism is a tradition of separation, right? And this idea of when something becomes impure and when something becomes tainted, yeah, that to me has always been problematic. And because it's impossible to write fiction that way. Fiction takes it takes reality and it changes it. And you can't draw that line between what is real, quote unquote real, and quote unquote made up. And to attempt to say that, you know, it's the name that is you know, the problem because it's the name that makes something popular, I would say I needed the name so that someone's going to read 40 pages of early Zionist history. You know, I come from a country of 380 million people. You know, to get them to read a book, they can't even pronounce the guy's name. It's not even about the famous Netanyahu. It's about his father that nobody knows. And there's a huge chunk of the book that recounts things that happened in the 1930s with people who have even more difficult names, right? Like, I have to do anything I can to make someone read that book. You know, I mean, short of going to their house, house to house, and reading it to them. And so part of that process is taking things that are very recognizable and making them impure and inflecting them with foreign elements, and not just the story of the Netanyahus, but frankly, the transition from the 1950s to the 1960s, which is from, you know, into the counterculture, and then layering on top of that a critique of identity politics and university politics that is very contemporary. You know, I'm trying to make people in the late 50s, early 60s, you know, talk about ideas that are relevant to us now. Yeah. And that I think is much more of a violation than just taking a guy's name.
Yeah, okay. So, no, I understand your point.
And also, he made up his name.
But, and in order to, I must say that when the title is the Netanyahus, but for people who will read the book, is not, in fact, the main character.
No, he's there for two paragraphs.
The main character is the person who tells the story.
Yes, absolutely.
No?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an American. I mean,
who is the American Jew who is in between? He is afraid of the goyim who are half hypocritical anti-Semitics, but they don't say that they despise him a bit in a certain way, in a hypocritical way, because he's Jewish, and he is caught between these Israelis, this Israeli family who could really be another family. It could be a Rabinovich family coming from Israel. You know, as in the 50s, people used to come and settle in a person's house and. Okay, and perhaps you say something about the person,
sure.
The Jewish professor, the Reuben Blum, yeah. Blum, or okay, Harold Blum
is you know how the Americans will mispronounce Bloom sometimes, yes. Right? But which doesn't come through in the Hebrew translation. But anyway, so the thing that I'll even connect the answer to the Netanyahu.
Yeah. Okay. Let us.
No. But wait. But, you know, but so it's you know these people are living in this nice suburban house in this tiny town. Reuben Blum, his wife Edith, and daughter Judy, and they've left the Bronx.
Judy, I have to interrupt you because Judy, when they introduce the family, when the Netanyahus come, and he says, "This is my daughter Judy," he said, "Yehudit." Yeah, immediately.
And not only that, but also he tells the
story of
Yehudit.
And
so you know, I was thinking about all of the arguments that I heard over the years growing up, from a very young age, right? That were the Netanyahu or Netanyahu-esque arguments that were made toward American Jews, right? You don't understand. We live in a rough neighborhood. I always love that sentence, you know. It's like, you know.
But it's true.
Sure, it's true. That's absolutely true. But, you know, 10 people just got murdered at a supermarket in Buffalo. The average murder rate in New York City per capita is much higher than in Jerusalem. So yeah, it's a different kind of rough neighborhood, absolutely. But the idea that it's a rough neighborhood, you know, there were these remarks made and about, you know, you don't understand, you don't have this existential threat. And of course, there have been wars of existence. And I wanted to bring that urgency, which I associate with the Netanyahu-esque urgency, right? For him, it was every moment is an existential crisis. Every point is an inflection point where not only is everything in peril, but he is the person who can provide the solution. I wanted to take this and bring it to America. Because someone comes in and someone crashes into your house with the idea that every moment's an existential emergency, and you're like, where's the emergency? Birds outside, got a fence, the same guy goes by on his bicycle every day, you know, they deliver the milk. It's the 1950s. Where's the emergency? Where's the fire, right? But there are people who are coming in yelling about the fire. And this is, I wanted it to be this classic, you know, we used to say liberal house. You know when a word is getting bad, is like going a little bad, when you put a prefix in front of it. So before liberal became neoliberal, it was liberal. and you know, this liberal house where they invite these people in, and these people insist that it's an emergency. They say, we're gonna eat your food. We have your food. You know, I don't have anything to wear to my husband's lecture tonight. Can we borrow your wife's clothes? Sure. You know, we can't do with these kids. Can your daughter babysit? Do that. Okay. Can I, you know, borrow your secretary to type up some notes? Can I borrow this? Can I borrow this? Can my son sleep with your daughter? Basically, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and the liberal gives and gives and gives and gives, because the scariest thing to the liberal is to say no, right? And a liberal has to resort to illiberal means in order to defend liberalism. How do you defend liberalism while still being a liberal? And this is the question that the Netanyahus bring to America and American Jews, whose sense of liberalism is adopted or inherited from an American tradition that tolerates them, that condescends to them, but mostly just, you know, we don't care. And this sets off all of these alarms in the head of Reuben Blum, who suddenly, with the arrival of the Netanyahus, becomes almost as panicked as they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's about, the novel is about authenticity, people who are authentic and people who are not. So you can see it like that. The Netanyahus come and they are like 100% authentic. They can be wrong. They can be, you know, chutzpanim, as you say, but they are authentic. They are what they are. They don't make any theater. They are not.
Absolutely.
No, I'm not blaming you. Of course, I'm just presenting the. Sorry.
The best theater.
Yeah, and the Bloom family is totally, you know, they don't know what this authenticity makes them frightened. It frightens them. But now,
well, I always say the question is authenticity to what? Because, you know, one of the amazing things is, you know, yes, Ben-Zion Netanyahu is always authentic to his emotions, without a doubt, and he's always authentic to his ideology, right?
Yeah, it's not nice to see it, but it's
it's absolutely true.
What you see is what you get, as you say.
But what it's not authentic to is the context, because he's living in suburban Philadelphia, and so there is this way in which he created, I believe, for his kids, a bubble of Israeli existential threat in Philly, and brings it, exports it to this American professor's house. And this American professor, though he is absolutely the apologetic Jew, in fact, from Ben-Zion Netanyahu's field of expertise, you know, medieval European history, you know, he begins calling him, you know, the Hof Juda, the Judio del Corte, the court Jew. You know, you are the court Jew. You are the and Ben-Zion Netanyahu was the expert on court Jews. He basically wrote a book about it, and this person is timid. He's meek. He is not authentic to his identity in the eyes of Ben-Zion Netanyahu, but in the eyes of Ben-Zion Netanyahu, to be authentic to his identity, Reuben Blum would have to make Aliyah.
Yeah.
And then Reuben Blum would make Aliyah, but Ben-Zion Netanyahu would still be in Philly.
Okay.
So, as one decides to become more authentic, one might end up very, 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 very alienated.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But so let me remind perhaps you tell the scene, one of the most, I don't know, funny, amazing scenes I've ever read, or lately at least, in the book. It's about the nose of Judy, the nose. Can you tell it, the story about the nose? And the significance of it.
Well, I mean, so a lot of this book is an attempt, the 50s and the 60s, are a time in American, it's a time in world Jewry, right, where basically everyone is busy becoming something else, right? Yeah. People are becoming Israeli.
She has a Jewish nose.
Yeah, I'm gonna set it up. It's just she has.
Judy
a Jewish
has
nose.
A Jewish nose, and she. But that's also this. Yeah,
she has a nose.
She has a Jewish nose, and she doesn't like it, and she wants to change it. But she. So okay.
So when I'll make this really quick, is that in Israel, Jews are busy becoming Israelis. In America, Jews are busy becoming American, right? Okay. And at the time, you have the explosion of Jewish American writing, right? You have, in fact, the year and the month that this book is set is the year and the month that Philip Roth's Goodbye Columbus, his first book, was published. And so you have all of these tropes of American Jewish literature that created for the first time in America, a public Jewish culture that everyone was reading or involved in, and I don't need to name all the names of that generation. Everyone can kind of fill that in, but part of the cliches of these books, right? And reviewers would review my book being like, he doesn't know that he's using cliches, and it's just like, thanks. I wanted to take these very identifiable scenes, such as the girl who has the Jewish nose and wants to get rid of it, the nose job scene, which is famous from Philip Roth, but has been done, Bellow has a nose job scene, Bruce J. Friedman has a nose job scene. There are a lot of them. But I wanted to, and it's always the girl who's begging to get the surgery, and then she gets the surgery. And this was this girl kneels against her door, kind of almost in the position of monks when they are immolating themselves, right? As people would do
in front of the door,
with their nose directly in front of the doorknob, so that when her grandfather comes through, it smashes her nose in and breaks it, and then she has to go get surgery to get it fixed.
Yeah, it's an amazing scene.
I'll tell you the origins of this scene. Yeah. The origins of this scene are a story that I heard when I was very young, and it was my mother was talking to a friend of hers, and she grew up in New York and then North Jersey, Perth Amboy, and this is when she was maybe early teens. And there was a girl in her school who wanted to get rid of her nose, horribly wanted to get rid of her nose. Parents, no one had any money, and they shouldn't come from the family that would do that. And she saved up her money and found I guess now we call them a homeless person. Back then there was a bum, right, on the street, and gave him some money and bought him some liquor. And he smashed her nose in with a snow shovel. Yeah.
So
and I remember my mother talking about this person and telling this story, and that story kind of always stuck with me. That's how much someone wanted to rid themselves of of an ethnic identifier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you mentioned Philip Roth and the Jewish literature of America, and when when one reads your book, it's really very characteristic to this, very similar to this genre. So my question is, what did you add to this style of writing? Because when you read it, you really feel that you are back in the 50s, in the 60s, when this writing began. But so, what is your, let's say, your contribution to the?
Yeah, no, I was reminded of the, because I can't let any, grudges go, right? So I'm reminded when you say that of it was Eric Glasner's review, where he says, yesh reach shel epigonium.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. No.
There's a smell of epigons, which is tough to do when you have your nose smashed in, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. What did I add to it? I think very few of those writers talked about Israel, with the exception of Roth, and those were in later books, not in books of that period at all.
True.
I think that not of the 50s and 60s. Yeah. Well, he had sex. That's not exactly a political engagement. No, maybe it is. Maybe I'm in the wrong politics, but okay. I was thinking and I was also thinking about in almost every approach to Israel in American Jewish fiction that I can think of, right? It's either some stupid place that's like in a travel brochure. I was about to say travel brochure, but I realized how old I am. Like a travel brochure. It's like it's just some nice hot place where Jews do things. I guess.
Kibbutz and all that.
Yeah, whatever. Right.
Girls.
Girls. Right. Yeah. And food became the new girls, I think.
Yeah. Hummus.
So or it is something that is it is a political signifier for an American condition, right? Where you're using external politics to talk about something internally a little bit. And all these questions, like you're bringing up, of authenticity, non-authenticity, of assimilation, and what is one assimilating to. And for me, I think that, and there's a foreignness and an otherness to it, right, in these books. And, I realized that, look, I had a traditional education, and I know how it sounds to read, the name Israel, like in the classic context, right? Yeah. And I know how I try to feel how some of those things that were written, how it felt to write them. But if I ran off this stage right now, and I don't even have to get a COVID test now, by the way, right? Yes. And I ran to Nutbog, and I my credit card works. I just got the Pulitzer, a little bit of money. I bought a ticket. I could be in New York, land in New York, just hang out, like drink with my friends, celebrate the Pulitzer, like get back in a cab, go right back to Newark Airport, buy another ticket, and come back here, and I can make the entire thing in like 26 hours. 26 hours, right? And that is look, I know all cultures in this world have gone through this change, not just the Jewish people. But the idea that you can be in Jerusalem and back again in a little over a day is a complete, it necessitates a complete rethinking of what Zion is, right? Of what home and away is, of what locality and alienation is. And I think we're all grappling with it. I think we're all grappling with the interconnectedness of these things on not just a familial or a political level, but on the way it makes us feel bodily as we pass through these spaces. And I think that to me is my, I don't know whether that's the difference of my writing, but it's the difference that I feel, and it's the difference that I try to write toward.
Yeah. So have you considered being an Israeli writer? Israeli writer in English, or in, I don't know.
I don't know see, that's what I'm saying. I don't know what being an Israeli writer in English would be different from what I am now, besides the tax situation.
No.
No?
No. I have to tell you that there's a big difference. Because if you were an Israeli...
in English.
An Israeli writer who has a public of readers in Israel, you wouldn't have written this novel. Why? Or the way you wrote it, because Israeli literature in general is very serious, takes itself very seriously, and they don't consider writers who write funny things or like funny scenes in their novels as serious. You have we talked about it. We tried to find the names of writers, of famous writers, who had a sense of humor.
Right, we did.
Okay, so Hanoch Levin. Who? Yeshua, but Yeshua is funny. It's not funny. It's very serious. The thing is that Agnon wasn't funny. Okay.
Seriously funny and funnily serious, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I don't look. I think that I find certain Israeli writers to be funny, but mostly not in prose. To be honest with you, I mean in theater. Yes. You know, I think in prose, the last, writer that I found like truly funny was Kanyuk.
Yes, Kanyuk.
Yeah.
Kanyuk.
I thought he was truly funny sometimes.
Yes.
When he wasn't funny, it was ugly, but it was, but when he was funny, he was funny. And I think that the question of I wouldn't have written it if I was Israeli. I mean, sure, but maybe I would have written the Trump thing. I mean, I'm waiting. I mean, now that I have a little bit of money, like I should put up a prize for an Israeli writer to write me a Jared Kushner novel, because I'm dying for it. I'm dying for it. And and anyone, if you're listening, you get in touch with me. I can give you so much research you wouldn't even know what to do with it, And it would be lovely.
So perhaps the book is about Trump and Jared Kushner. It's a kind of.
I mean, in a lot of ways. Look, I wrote this during lockdown in New York, and there were protests, that had many different motivations, but they were definitely. This occurred somewhere between, Jews will not replace us, right? And George Floyd, and I was writing this book, and I absolutely was thinking about Trump. I was thinking about the way in which this saga of the Trump family just invaded my life, right? But Fred Trump wasn't going to go to a job interview. Fred Trump didn't meet, that's Donald Trump's dad, didn't meet Harold Bloom.
Yeah.
I was wondering what they would talk about. Maybe like, I don't know, the price of cement or something. But it just so happens that, there was a real life occurrence that I was lucky enough to hear about. I also want to say that one of the things that I keep on being brought back to also, I mean, I just did now was the Trump thing. I've been asked this question a lot about, Trump and Bibi, and why didn't you just do Trump, and why didn't, I feel for like 3 or 4 days, I've been saying, well, you can't look directly at Trump, you can't do this, and you can't do that, and I was, and I cracked at some point, like today, I just cracked at some point today, and I told this person who I then just ran away. This was just a person talking to me in the hallway here, and I said, you know what, like I'm done with this Trump shit, right? Honestly, Bibi is much closer to Obama. He reminds me of Obama.
Is it recorded? Okay. So I'll show it to.
I'll tell in a number of senses. One, Bibi's enormously intelligent, and Obama is intelligent, more so than Trump. Articulate, but they code switch, meaning they talk to different groups in different ways. Everyone always liked during the Obama years to say when Obama was talking to a black audience, he, quote, sounded black. When he talked to a white audience, he knew how to sound white. When he talked to, an audience of young people, he could sound cool. When he talked to an audience of old people, he could sound, old, concerned, something, right? When he wanted to be peaceful after the Nobel Peace Prize, he could, which was insane that they gave it to him, he can then go and sound like he's Churchill or something. And then when he goes and they kill bin Laden, he can sound like, like a gangster, right? And Bibi, in that exact same way, you know, he can be the guy from Philly speaking English. You know, he's the privileged Ashkenaz. If he's talking to Mizrahim, he can even convince people that he's Mizrahi, right? Like, and the ability to switch codes that fluently and to live with so many different shifting masks is a fundamentally Obama personality trait. Trump talks the same way to a flag. He talked to a flag. You know? So, I mean, this is not a man who alters his message, right? And so I also just wanted to say that you know, this was like this wasn't just a, you know, a critique of the perceived right or the importation of a right, you know, right wing. This is, you know, I was thinking a lot about political rhetoric and the way in which, you know, Bibi's ensured his survival by being able to mix huge elements of classic liberal politics, you know, in terms of the way that he talks to people and communicates.
Yeah. Let us return to the novel, to a chapter that I find very Israeli in a way, very typical Israeli. It's a chapter of, it's a letter written by a professor who teaches in Jerusalem in those old days, against like a non-recommendation to
non-recommendation.
Don't give Ben Zion Netanyahu a job in your college.
No, he said, please give him a job, but I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
This what you call in Hebrew firgun kacha. So can you explain why did you put this chapter? Because it's a funny chapter, it's a very good chapter, and it's very Israeli because it shows really the hypocrisy of the Israeli professors of those times, and always perhaps, but this you know, wickedness, this writing a letter to a poor don't give him a job, or in a way give him a job, but it's not a good idea.
Well, I mean, and I think this is an element that it's interesting to see just where, you know, different constituencies see different things in the book. I mean, the real answer, if I'm going to be honest, right, not political way, in an honest way, I needed a mechanism, I needed some way to tell the backstory, the story of the 1920s. And there was no other way to tell it besides putting it in the letter. So that's just, it's just, you know, how do you keep the house together, right? How do you keep the machine working? But what I was thinking about was, frankly, university politics, campus politics. And one of the things that I was, you know, thinking about Netanyahu at that time, I was, you know, doing some research. I was, and suddenly I was, you know, struck. You know, people say that he, you know, didn't get a job at Hebrew University because he was an asshole, because he was on the wrong political side, because he didn't know how to get along with people, because he really interrupted an event with a stink bomb, you know, that his brother made, and because he was an editor of different religious periodicals. And but then there was this other element, and then other people say that he didn't get it because he wasn't good enough, right? But there is this thing that I was looking at, and I immediately heard a phrase in my head. And it's the phrase, it's a Trump-era phrase, and it's, you know, the immigrants are taking our jobs, right? And this was the case for Ben Zion Netanyahu, because every year that he's in Hebrew University, right, more and more refugee scholars from Europe are coming over, people who taught medieval history at major universities for decades who have to leave Europe. And, you know, they'll work for nothing, you know? So the idea that there is this local educated boy, you know, though he was born in Warsaw, he really was more Palestinian, more Israeli than, you know, these guys who came from Germany. The person you're talking about is a German scholar.
Very
a guy whose name is, you know, Peter Lugner, changes his name to Peretz Levavi, right? So, right. And so he is, every year that he is coming up and getting toward doing his thesis, there are more and more people coming in who are capable of teaching his subject. And I think his resentment against them was an enormous part of his alienation from the university. And so I wanted to work that in, because it was, in a way, it was like he was paying for his identity, right? And which is a crazy thing to think about, right? I mean, already he's in a minoritarian identity position, being a Jew in a British, colony, right? But beyond that, he is then on the wrong side of political history, being a Jabotinsky, being a revisionist. And then beyond that, he's considered something of a Sabra, or something of, certainly more rooted here, and knows the language better than people who were coming 2 days ago who were getting jobs instead of him. So he's pushed more and more and more to the margin. And then, what is the classic insult, which is in that letter, is Klausner asks him to be an editor of the encyclopedia. And one of the classic rules of editing encyclopedia is the person who edits it cannot include an entry on themselves.
Yes.
So he has to write an entry on everyone he hates and everything he hates, but he can't write about himself.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it shows, really it shows, the more you are talking, the more we see how complex is this personality of, and how in a complex way you made it complex, and it's not at all a kind of caricature. And the talking about this academia, the Ruben Blum or Bloom is subject of research is taxes, the history of taxation in the States. And it reminded me immediately the professor at Agnon, Shira of Agnon, the professor who is the lover of Shira, who is also his research is about the bathhouses in Byzantium, okay? This kind of okay, and the so why did you take this why taxation? Why is a professor of
taxation? I mean, so there are two answers to that. I mean, one is that Ben-Zion Netanyahu's specialty is medieval European history, and especially the role of the court Jew or the shtadlan of the community.
Yeah, Abarbanel in reality wrote about about Abarbanel. Yeah,
exactly. That was his thesis, and so a lot of his work is about a king or a duke or a prince, mostly a prince or a duke, wants to go to war against another prince or a duke, and he has a Jew and he says to the Jew, like, go collect the taxes enough to finance my war. And that was the role of the tax farmer in medieval dukedoms. And that was a big part of his research, of Ben-Zion Netanyahu's research. And the idea of the person whose job it is, and if you can't collect that amount of taxes, we'll take it from the Jews. Right. So I wanted to have this element of that profession in Ruben Blum's very dry and American discipline. And the second one was because Harold Bloom's biggest, idea, he's one of the rare people who he's most famous for his best idea. Most people aren't, right? And his best idea is it's in his book, Anxiety of Influence. And I'll make a very brief version of this. It's that, we are all belated. We come to life, when we're born, we're too late. We're all too late. Too late for everything. And we look behind us, and we discover as we get older, there's so much history behind us, and so many masterpieces that people made. And the weight of this beauty and this intelligence and this information that we have taken is crushing. And it destroys us.
Yes.
And so in order to survive within it, we have to unconsciously misinterpret the past and convince ourselves that the past was wrong, that someone made a mistake back there, and that only we can correct it. Now, for an artist, that's a very interesting position. That allows you, I think, to create, even though there have been great writers before us, right? What about a politician who believes that everything before him was wrong and only he can correct it? So this anxiety of influence asks about, what do you owe to the past? What is your debt that you have to pay to the past? The past is some sort of taxation on you. You must spend some time learning about it and apprenticing yourself to it. And I wanted to have that element of Harold in there.
Yeah. Okay. So people are making these signs that the end is coming, but I have to ask you about a previous book of yours, the Book of Numbers, where the name is very important, because your name is Joshua Cohen. The name of the main character is Joshua Cohen in the book, who is a writer, a ghost writer, who is writing a book about a kind of billionaire whose name is Joshua Cohen.
Yes.
And but the background of all that is the story. Can you just clarify it for people who don't know? The story of Edward Snowden.
Oh.
Snowden.
Okay.
So, okay.
Well, what
Can you tell, just as a, you know.
Okay. I wrote that book before.
Yes.
I did. So I don't know. I mean, there's not much I can say about Edward Snowden, except it was an honor to work with him. I spent a long time with him, and I worked with him very closely, and he's a close friend and a wonderful person who's in a highly untenable situation right now. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, you know, this is a person whose connection to the world is through the internet. Yeah. And the way he uses the internet these days is punishable by 15 years of prison in Russia. So
yeah, but the fact that you met him and that you were close to him is shows that you are a courageous person, and you are kind of you are not afraid. So no, what I want to end this saying that you are more like Ben-Zion Netanyahu in the book than the other, that you are.
This is the nicest
kind of
thing you've said all night. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
no,
it's really because you dare doing things. That,
this is something that I said. You know, I've said before, but you know, I really I thank you, but I also think that someone who really believes in something. You know, I mean, I grew up around people who really believed in something. And I've met a lot of other people who believed in something. I believe in a few things. But I think that when you really believe in something, what other people call a risk doesn't feel like a risk to you. You know? It feels like unless you do that, you can't be alive. Unless you do this, you can't be, you're almost not fit to be in the world. And so I do appreciate that other people kind of see it as risks. And certainly, every Israeli publisher did, except one. Yeah. But I think for the one who did, and for you know, Deborah Harris and her agency who took it on here, and for
say
Oded
the
Carmeli,
name of the
Oded
Carmeli
and Havelor.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, from Deborah Harris, who was foreign rights agent here in Israel, and for Oded, it was not a risk, and I think that's because you know, life would be boring if they didn't do it. So no, perhaps there's a sign from divine sign, and so I'm happy that I said something nice finally, and I'm sure that. It's the Netanyahu family won't be. They read the book with a great pleasure. I mean, I will say, I want to say one thing too. And I'm just going to end it with is that sure, you know, why would he read it, right? And it's about his father, but okay. You pay someone to read it, maybe. He tells someone to read it, and they don't read it. Here's the point is, it doesn't matter. What's interesting is that someone did, right? And if I got, and so there are a few facts in the book. It's a novel, but there are a few facts. If I got any fact wrong, I would have heard about it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Its silence is proof
that, like, it's true.
I did an okay job.
Yeah. Yeah, great. But then when we give credit to the publisher, the Hebrew publisher. But so perhaps you'll allow me to say that as a lot of the facts that you about Ben Zion Netanyahu are taken from a research that is done by a colleague of mine in Haaretz, Adi Armon, Dr. Adi Armon.
That he did for Molad.
For Molad, yeah. And he's writing the biography of Ben Zion Netanyahu.
Yeah, I mean, I also stole from Ben Caspid. I stole from
of course.
Pfeffer.
Yeah,
I stole from Harold Bloom. I mean, but
of course, yeah.
I steal.
But I just wanted
That's how
to
the birds build their nest.
I wanted to lefargen to my colleague.
Absolutely.
And, yeah. So. Really, thank you very much.
Thank you.